just part of it. You know, there's entertainers and there's competitors, and I totally understand that. And my job is to compete, and that's what I'm focused on doing. Of course, we're doing this mid-game, but you know, it's something that I'll get used to. And
for real? Somebody call me Junior too.
Come on up,
When I
pulled
up, I thought you was Junior. I got put on my face.
Stop right here for me. Just go on and fill in, go on and fill in.
I seen you, but now. Coming. Yeah, they talking about it. We coming. They doubting us. We coming. They saying. We coming. They think it's a game. We coming. I don't give a damn what they say. You best believe it.
Dillon Gabriel's words after the game weren't supposed to spark chaos, but within minutes, fans were convinced he'd just taken a direct shot at Shedeur Sanders. Social media lit up, headlines swirled, and suddenly this wasn't just about football anymore, it was about pride, respect, and whether history was repeating itself. So what really happened that night in Philadelphia? Did Gabriel cross the line, or is this all another chapter in the growing storm around Shedeur Sanders? The moment didn't look like much at first. Just a quarterback, standing at a podium, giving a routine post-game answer. But sometimes, it's not about what's said, it's about how it's said. And in Dillon Gabriel's case, one line turned into a storm that still hasn't settled. The press conference was supposed to be standard. Cameras flashing, reporters throwing out questions, players doing their best to keep things calm and professional. But when Gabriel was asked about the difference between entertainers and competitors, his response felt loaded. He leaned into the microphone and said plainly, "My job is to compete. That's what I'm focused on doing." Now, on paper, that sounds harmless. A quarterback saying he's locked in, focused, and not worried about the outside noise. But here's where things got complicated. Fans didn't just hear that answer. They connected the dots. They remembered the atmosphere of the game. They remembered who he had just played against. And suddenly, the line between a simple statement and a subtle shot got very blurry. Within minutes, social media exploded. Clips of the quote went viral. Fans started debating. Was Gabriel really throwing shade at Shedeur Sanders? Or was this just the media twisting his words? Some called it flat-out disrespectful, arguing that Gabriel knew exactly what he was doing. Others said he was just being honest, focusing on his own job. But one thing was certain. The timing couldn't have been worse. See, this wasn't just any game. Emotions were already sky-high. The stakes were heavy, the spotlight was intense, and Shedeur Sanders was right in the middle of it. For Gabriel to drop a line like that right after the game, whether intentional or not, made it almost impossible for fans not to connect it back to Sanders. It felt personal, even if he later insisted it wasn't. And that's the thing about perception in sports. The truth doesn't always matter as much as the way things are received. Fans don't hear every word in a vacuum. They hear it against the backdrop of rivalry, controversy, and narratives that already exist. And when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, the narratives are bigger than most players could ever imagine. Once the clip started spreading, the reaction was swift. Words like disrespect, cheap shot, and out-of-pocket flooded timelines. People weren't just reacting, they were picking sides. Some came to Gabriel's defense, saying athletes should be allowed to speak freely without every comment being dissected. Others doubled down, arguing that Gabriel knew exactly what kind of firestorm he was lighting. And here's what made it even more explosive. Gabriel's tone. It wasn't just the words he used, it was how he said them. Calm, clipped, almost dismissive. To Shedeur's supporters, it felt like a jab. To neutral fans, it at least felt unnecessary. And to critics of Sanders, it was fuel a moment to say out loud what many had been whispering. From that moment forward, the debate wasn't just about Gabriel's performance on the field. It was about whether he had crossed a line off it. And whether he meant it or not, the story was out of his control. Because in today's NFL, perception spreads faster than facts. One clip, one comment, one moment of tension can define the entire narrative. And Dillon Gabriel had just given the world a soundbite that would stick. But here's the twist. The more Gabriel tried to backtrack and explain himself, the worse it got. The questions only grew sharper, the headlines more dramatic. And while he may have thought it would all blow over, this was just the beginning of a storm that tied him directly to Shedeur Sanders in a way he couldn't escape. And as fans piled in with their opinions, another even bigger question started to rise. Was this the first time Shedeur had been on the receiving end of this kind of shade? Or was history repeating itself? The fallout was immediate. By the time most fans had even left the stadium, Dillon Gabriel's words were already making waves across social media. The clip was clipped, reposted, and dissected from every possible angle. And the debate that followed wasn't quiet, it was loud, heated, and split straight down the middle. On one side were the fans who felt Gabriel had crossed a line. To them, this wasn't just a quarterback speaking off the cuff. This was a calculated dig, aimed squarely at Shedeur Sanders. The phrasing, the timing, the emotion of the moment, everything pointed to intent. These fans argued that Gabriel knew the cameras were rolling, knew Shedeur was the centerpiece of the conversation, and decided to make a statement anyway. To them, it wasn't confidence. It was disrespect. But not everyone saw it that way. A second camp rushed to Gabriel's defense, insisting that the entire thing had been blown out of proportion. They claimed it was nothing more than a player reminding the world that his focus was on competing, not entertaining. In their eyes, Gabriel's words were stripped of context and twisted by people eager to stir up drama. He wasn't calling out Shedeur, they argued. He was just doing his job. That clash of perspectives is what made this moment so powerful, because in sports, especially when emotions are already running high, perception becomes reality. It doesn't matter what the player meant to say. What matters is how it's heard, how it's shared, and how it fits into the narrative fans already believe. And for Shedeur Sanders, that narrative is heavy. Every word said about him carries extra weight, not just because of his own talent, but because of who he is. He's not just another quarterback. He's the son of Deion Sanders. He's the face of a program that's been under the brightest spotlight in college football. And he's been carrying the label of entertainer ever since that now infamous moment in Oregon when Dan Lanning said Colorado was playing for clicks, not championships. That line set the tone for how critics view Shedeur, and Gabriel's comments felt like deja vu. Fans weren't just reacting to one sentence in a press conference, they were hearing echoes of the disrespect Shedeur has been facing for years. The word competitor wasn't just a compliment to Gabriel. It was a contrast, an implied jab at Sanders, who many felt was being framed as the opposite. And once that connection was made, there was no going back. Gabriel could deny, clarify, and explain all he wanted, but the seed was already planted. Reporters jumped on it, pressing him to say whether he was calling out Shedeur directly. His response was quick. He insisted he didn't mean it that way, but by then, the damage was done. Fans had made up their minds. Because here's the truth. In sports culture, once a soundbite catches fire, it takes on a life of its own. People don't rewind the footage for context. They don't care about the subtle pauses or the intended meaning. They care about the headline, the narrative, the drama. And in this case, that drama painted Gabriel as the latest name on the growing list of players seen as taking shots at Shedeur Sanders. For Sanders supporters, this was fuel. They rallied around him online, defending him, demanding respect, and calling Gabriel's words unnecessary. For critics, it was confirmation bias, another reason to argue that Shedeur doesn't deserve the hype he gets. Either way, Gabriel had sparked a fire he couldn't control, and the conversation had shifted from the game itself to the narrative swirling around Sanders. And here's the kicker. The more the conversation grew, the more it reminded people of something bigger. This wasn't the first time a quarterback had made headlines at Shedeur's expense. And if history was any guide, this might not be the last. Because long before Gabriel's comments, there was another infamous statement, one that set the standard for what many are now calling the Shedeur effect. And when you hear it side by side with Gabriel's words, the similarities are hard to ignore. For fans of Shedeur Sanders, Dillon Gabriel's words sounded all too familiar. They weren't just controversial on their own, they carried an echo, a reminder of one of the most infamous moments in Shedeur's college career. To understand why people reacted so strongly, you have to rewind to 2023, when Colorado rolled into Eugene to face Oregon. That's when Oregon head coach Dan Lanning delivered a pregame speech that went viral in seconds. His words cut deep. They're not playing for championships, they're playing for clicks. That single line became the rallying cry for Colorado's critics. It painted the Buffaloes as a sideshow, more concerned with flash than substance, more focused on attention than actual wins. And because Shedeur Sanders was the face of the team with the swagger, the watch flex, and the highlight plays, that label stuck to him most of all. Now, fast forward to Gabriel's comments. When he talked about competitors versus entertainers, fans instantly drew the parallel. To many, it felt like a remix of Lanning's statement. Different wording, different speaker, but the same underlying message. Shedeur isn't a real competitor. He's an entertainer, a showman, someone chasing the spotlight instead of chasing championships. And once that comparison took root, the controversy gained momentum. Fans said Gabriel wasn't just speaking for himself, he was tapping into the same disrespect that's followed Shedeur since Oregon. Whether Gabriel intended it or not, the perception was clear. He had reopened an old wound. For Shedeur, that wound has never fully healed. Every time he takes the field, it feels like he's fighting more than just the opposing defense. He's fighting a narrative that's been stamped on him since that Oregon game. Every word, every mistake, every celebration gets filtered through the lens of entertainer versus competitor. And Gabriel's comment poured gasoline on that fire. The timing only made it worse. Shedeur has been under a microscope all off-season, battling for respect in a new environment, trying to prove himself not just as Deion's son, but as a quarterback who belongs at the next level. And then, out of nowhere, another player revives the same old storyline. For critics, it was validation. For supporters, it was a slap in the face. That's why the reaction felt so intense. It wasn't just about one post-game comment, it was about history repeating itself, about Shedeur being dragged back into a fight he thought he had already left behind. And in the world of football, perception sticks. Which raises the bigger question, how much does this narrative actually affect his future? Because on the field, one thing matters above all performance. And in Shedeur's case, the QB battle he's locked in has left little room for error. If Dillon Gabriel's comments stirred up controversy, the timing couldn't have been worse for Shedeur Sanders. Because while social media was busy debating whether Gabriel took a shot at him, the reality on the field was just as chaotic. The Cleveland Browns' quarterback battle had already been one of the most talked about storylines in training camp, and Shedeur's every snap was under a microscope. At times, he's looked electric. Quick release, sharp decision-making, and the kind of poise you rarely see in a rookie. There were moments in camp where you could feel the buzz building, where it seemed like Shedeur might just seize the job outright. Those flashes are what keep his supporters confident. They see the accuracy, the confidence, the ability to stay calm when the pocket collapses, and they believe it's only a matter of time before he's the guy. But quarterback competitions are never judged on highlights alone. They're judged on consistency, and that's where Shedeur has shown his growing pains. In the same practices where he's delivered perfect strikes, he's also been caught holding the ball too long, missing reads, or taking drive-killing sacks. For every wow moment, there's been a reminder that he's still adjusting to the speed and complexity of the NFL game. And that's the messy part. The Browns don't just need a quarterback who can shine in spurts, they need someone steady, someone reliable. With veterans breathing down his neck and coaches weighing every rep, Shedeur doesn't have the luxury of time. Every mistake is magnified, every stumble sparks another round of debate. So when Gabriel's words started circulating, they hit even harder. Because in some ways, Shedeur's battle isn't just with his teammates for the starting job, it's with the perception that he's more style than substance. Winning this competition isn't just about claiming the Q-bone spot, it's about rewriting that narrative once and for all. The moment Dillon Gabriel's interview clip hit the internet, it spread like wildfire. What might have been a casual post-game comment instantly transformed into the headline of the week. Fans clipped it, shared it, and before long, the debate wasn't about Oklahoma or Gabriel's own performance, it was all about Shedeur Sanders. On social media, the reaction split down the middle. Some fans backed Gabriel, arguing that he was just telling the truth. They pointed to Shedeur's flash, the watch flex celebrations, the social media presence and said, "See? That's exactly what he is, an entertainer." To them, Gabriel wasn't insulting anyone, he was just calling it like he saw it. But for others, the comments crossed a line. They felt Gabriel had taken an unnecessary shot, one that ignored what Shedeur had been fighting through all season. They pointed to his toughness, his leadership, his willingness to stand in the pocket behind one of the most battered offensive lines in college football. They saw a quarterback who took hit after hit, game after game, but kept getting back up. To dismiss that effort as entertainment felt insulting not just to Shedeur, but to anyone who's watched him grind. And the media? They loved it. Sports talk shows lit up with debates. Analysts argued over whether Gabriel was out of line or simply saying what everyone else was thinking. Headlines framed it as a rivalry brewing off the field, as if the two quarterbacks had thrown down a gauntlet for each other. Some even suggested Gabriel was trying to get inside Shedeur's head, adding a mental edge to an already brutal QB competition. Then came the voices that mattered most, the players and coaches around Shedeur. Former teammates and current supporters chimed in to defend him, reminding everyone that behind the swagger was a competitor who lived and breathed the game. And of course, Deion Sanders himself didn't stay silent for long. Prime has always been protective of his sons, and this was no different. Without naming names, Deion sent out a message that dripped with meaning. You can't question a man's heart when you've never walked in his shoes. Fans didn't need a translator. Everyone knew who he was talking about. The more the backlash grew, the more it became clear that Gabriel's words had struck a nerve far beyond what he probably intended. What might have been an offhand comment had reignited one of the biggest narratives in college football. Is Shedeur Sanders a competitor or just a showman? And as the firestorm grew, one question loomed over everything. How would Shedeur respond? Because in this game, words only last so long. At some point, the field becomes the only answer. For all the noise surrounding Dillon Gabriel's comments, Shedeur Sanders handled the situation in the most telling way possible, with silence followed by action. While fans and media dissected every word, Shedeur didn't clap back online, didn't post a cryptic message, and didn't feed the frenzy. Instead, he stuck to the same formula that got him here, letting his play do the talking. At the very next practice, it was clear he'd heard the chatter. Teammates said the intensity was different, sharper. Every throw carried a little more zip. Every read was faster. Every drill looked like it meant something bigger. And it wasn't just showmanship. The results backed it up. Reporters on the sideline noted one of his most efficient sessions yet, multiple completions in tight windows, a touchdown strike in red zone drills, and perhaps most importantly, far fewer mistakes. This was the response fans had been waiting for, not a war of words, but proof. Proof that Shedeur wasn't just a highlight reel quarterback. Proof that he could take criticism, filter out the noise, and turn it into fuel. In a way, Gabriel's jab may have sparked exactly what Shedeur needed, a reminder that perception is as much a part of the battle as performance. But Shedeur's silence wasn't just strategy, it was also personal. He's grown up watching his father, Deion Sanders, navigate decades of criticism and spotlight. Prime taught him one of the oldest lessons in sports. Don't waste time trading words when you can trade wins. And that mindset showed in how Shedeur carried himself throughout the week. No complaints, no excuses, just work. That approach didn't go unnoticed in Cleveland's locker room. Veterans respected the way he kept his head down and grinded. Coaches, too, saw the shift. Instead of folding under pressure, Shedeur leaned into it, showing the kind of mental toughness teams crave in a franchise quarterback. Still, one good week of practice doesn't end the controversy. Questions lingered and critics didn't suddenly vanish, but Shedeur's response was a statement of its own. He wasn't here for clout. He wasn't here for validation. He was here to win. And while Dillon Gabriel's words may have triggered a firestorm, Shedeur's actions began to rewrite the narrative, piece by piece. Because in football, perception is fleeting, but production is undeniable, and Shedeur was starting to prove that he had both in his arsenal. For all the headlines, practice battles, and social media debates, the weight of this quarterback controversy ultimately falls on the Cleveland Browns coaching staff and front office. And make no mistake, the decision isn't just about football, it's about the direction of the entire franchise. On one hand, you've got the safe choice. Roll with the veteran. Experience, steady leadership, fewer mistakes under pressure. That's the route most teams would take when they're trying to stay competitive in a brutal AFC North. Playing a rookie quarterback, no matter how talented, always comes with risk. Mistakes pile up fast in this league, and one bad stretch can derail a season before it even gets going. But then there's Shedeur Sanders, the upside pick. He's the unknown factor, the player who brings not just talent, but energy, attention, and momentum. Every throw he makes, every highlight that goes viral, it all feeds into a narrative that the Browns could be building something special. Fans are excited, the locker room is paying attention, and there's a sense that Cleveland has a chance to ride this wave into a new era. That's the crossroads Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry now face. Do they stick with stability, or do they gamble on the spark? Because as much as people frame this as Shedeur versus Gabriel, the truth is the decision could ripple through the entire league. Start Shedeur too early, and he struggles. Critics will say the Browns mishandled him. Wait too long, and you risk stalling the momentum, losing the belief that this is truly his team. And layered on top of all this, the family factor. Deion Sanders isn't just any parent. He's a Hall of Famer, a media powerhouse, and one of the most influential voices in sports today. While Dillon has been careful not to overstep, his presence looms large. Every time he speaks about Shedeur, it becomes national news. That kind of pressure doesn't just hang over Shedeur, it hangs over the Browns' front office too. Behind closed doors, reports say the coaching staff has been split. Some love Shedeur's command and upside. Others point to the inconsistencies and caution against rushing him. And with Gabriel publicly stirring the pot, the timeline may feel even more compressed. The Browns don't just need to pick a quarterback, they need to pick a direction. Because in the NFL, indecision is deadly. And whether it's Shedeur now or later, this choice could define not just the season, but the legacy of the people making it. When you look at the heated workouts, the arguments on social media, and Dillon Gabriel's harsh words, this quarterback dispute in Cleveland isn't simply between Shedeur Sanders and another youngster. It's not just about who gets the opening snap of the regular season. What we're truly seeing is a club on the verge of a big change. A choice could either send them into a new era or keep them stuck in the same cycle of mediocrity that has defined Cleveland football for decades. Let's be honest, the Browns are different from most teams. This isn't a franchise with a trophy case full of Lombardists to fall back on. This city has been famished for hope and has seen false dawn after false dawn. Every few years, a savior quarterback comes in, and every few years, that savior fails. When Shedeur Sanders got to Cleveland, it wasn't just another draft pick. It was another chance to change the story, another chance to ultimately turn the tables. The Sanders name is what makes this narrative different. Shedeur is not going down this road by herself. He is the son of Dillon, prime-time Sanders, a Hall of Famer, a cultural icon, and a man who has built a living by proving people wrong. That shadow might be heavy, but it can also be a torch. And for Shedeur, it's both. He doesn't just represent himself, he represents a legacy. Every time he gets on the field, he's carrying not just Cleveland's expectations, but the weight of a family name that has been linked with spotlight and bravado for decades. That's why Gabriel's remarks hit so profoundly. They weren't just questioning Shedeur's arm talent or his ability to read defenses, they were asking whether the buzz was legitimate, whether he was just riding his father's coattails. And in a league as ruthless as the NFL, perception matters almost as much as performance. If players across the league start to believe Shedeur isn't ready, that narrative may persist longer than any interception. But here's the twist. Shedeur didn't fight perception with words. He battled it with quiet. He absorbed the criticism, took the jab, and transformed it into gasoline. That kind of restraint, that ability to stay focused when everyone else is shouting, is what separates competent quarterbacks from franchise quarterbacks. And while it's just practice, that response taught the Browns coaching staff all they needed to know about who Shedeur is when the limelight becomes unfriendly. Still, that doesn't solve the dilemma. Because the Browns' decision isn't simply about talent, it's about timing. Drop Shedeur into the starting lineup too early, and you risk undermining his confidence if the loses pile up. Keep him on the bench too long, and you risk losing the locker room and the fan base who want to see their future leader on the field. It's a razor's edge decision, and there's no certainty either road leads to success. What complicates things further is the NFL's hard reality. This league doesn't wait for anyone. Every game is magnified, every loss builds pressure, and every QB decision is scrutinized quickly. One error and the story can shift overnight. Look no farther than how the national media portrayed this topic. One week, Shedeur is the rookie prodigy lighting up camp. The next, he's the subject of mistrust and skepticism. That's how rapidly perspective shifts in the NFL. And the Browns front office knows it. And while the coaches dispute in meeting rooms, the fans are already selecting sides. Some are all in on Shedeur, calling him the spark this organization has needed for years. Others are dubious, saying the buzz feels similar, that they've seen this tale before and it didn't end well. But regardless of whose camp you belong into, one thing is certain, Shedeur Sanders has already made Cleveland relevant in a way they haven't been in years. His name alone has turned training camp highlights into national conversation points. That's power. And that's leverage. But let's not forget that Gabriel's role in all this isn't over either. By speaking up, he inserted himself into the core of the conversation, and whether he intended it or not, he's now the measuring stick. Every time Shedeur makes a mistake, people will say, maybe Gabriel was right. Every time Shedeur makes a big play, people will say Gabriel lit the fire. It's a competition built out of words, but it might define both of their careers. So where does that leave us? With a Browns team facing a choice that might affect not just the season, but the future of the club, do they trust the veteran presence to steady the ship? Or should they release Shedeur and see if lightning can strike again, once for Dillon and now for his son? The truth is, there may not be a perfect answer. This controversy is complex because it's designed to be. Growth often comes with growing pains. And for Cleveland, this is the kind of situation they've wanted to have for years. Too much skill, too much promise, too many possibilities. It's a considerably better problem than not having a quarterback at all. But here's the part that should keep everyone watching. No matter what the coaches decide, Shedeur Sanders has already transformed the Browns. He's forced the franchise to look at itself differently. He's forced the league to pay attention. And he's caused supporters to believe again, if only for a moment, that something remarkable might possibly be happening in Cleveland. And maybe that's the true story here. Because whether Shedeur starts week 1 or has to wait his turn, the future feels different. The old Browns were distinguished by disappointment. But these Browns? They're being characterized by a battle, by a scandal, by a quarterback who refuses to collapse when the limelight becomes harsh. So as the season gets closer, the question isn't only who earns the starting job. The underlying question is this: can Shedeur Sanders transform all this noise, all this pressure, and all this expectation into something Cleveland has never truly had, a quarterback who not only survives the storm, but thrives in it? Because if he can, then Dillon Gabriel's comments won't just be remembered as a barb, they'll be remembered as the spark that started the fire. And that's why the entire NFL is watching Cleveland right now. While the Cleveland Browns' internal quarterback battle has dominated local headlines, what many don't realize is how much this saga has rippled across the rest of the NFL. Because this isn't just about one rookie trying to prove himself. This is about how the league views hype, legacy, and the future of a position that defines franchises. And trust me, people around the league are paying attention. Inside locker rooms from Dallas to Miami, Shedeur Sanders' name has already become a talking point. Veterans, especially those who have seen the cycle of next big thing quarterbacks come and go, are watching carefully. Some dismiss it as overblown. It's just practice, one unnamed AFC veteran reportedly told a beat writer. Talk to me when the kid wins a game in December. That skepticism is real, and it's part of the DNA of the NFL. Players know how fast hype can fade once the season grind starts. But not everyone is brushing Shedeur off. In fact, a surprising number of young players see him as a trailblazer. His confidence, his composure under fire, and even the way he handled Gabriel's jab without spiraling into drama, those are traits that resonate with rookies and second-year players still fighting for their spot. He's showing us you can be yourself even when everyone's watching, one young wide receiver told a reporter. That's not just respect, that's influence. And when you have influence in the NFL, you start to shift the conversation. The media, of course, is feeding that fire. Every national talk show has weighed in on the controversy, framing it in the way that best drives clicks and ratings. Some argue Gabriel crossed the line. Others say he simply told the truth and exposed Shedeur's inexperience. Still, others frame it as proof that Shedeur is already in the heads of his opponents because, let's be honest, if Gabriel really thought Shedeur wasn't worth the hype, he wouldn't have said anything at all. He would have ignored him. Instead, he chose to speak, and that speaks volumes. Front offices are watching too. NFL general managers don't just scout players, they study trends. And Shedeur's arrival is forcing them to think about a new era of quarterbacking, one where performance and personal brand go hand in hand. It's no secret, Shedeur's NIL success at Colorado changed the game in college football. Now, his presence in Cleveland is raising an uncomfortable question for the NFL. Can they keep up with a new generation of quarterbacks who don't just play the game but own the spotlight? That's what makes this controversy so much bigger than one rookie. The NFL has always been a league built on hierarchy, veterans before rookies, production before headlines. But Shedeur is challenging that formula. Even before he's taken a regular season snap, he's already the most talked about rookie in the league. That kind of attention usually takes years to build. For the NFL, it's both exciting and dangerous. And here's the thing. Rival teams are strategizing around it. Coaches won't admit it publicly, but you better believe defensive coordinators are already preparing game plans that assume Shedeur will be starting sooner rather than later. Why? Because you don't want to be the team that underestimates him and ends up on the wrong end of a viral highlight reel. One breakout game, one upset win, and suddenly Shedeur goes from rookie hype to must-watch quarterback. And that changes how every team on the Browns' schedule approaches them. Even league marketing is being affected. The NFL is built on stories Mahomes' magic, Burrow's swagger, Brady's legacy. Shedeur Sanders, with his famous last name and his polarizing rise, is a dream for the league's promotional machine. Already, analysts are speculating that if he starts early and performs well, you'll see the Browns in more primetime games, more national spotlights, more feature packages. And for a franchise that's often been an afterthought, that's a massive shift. But not everyone is cheering. For every fan buying into the Sanders hype, there are others who think it's bad for the game. They argue the NFL should be about merit, not marketing. That Shedeur's spotlight is overshadowing other rookies grinding in silence. That Gabriel, for all his bluntness, might actually represent the majority opinion among players. Prove it first, then we'll talk. That tension isn't going away, and it may only grow as the season unfolds. Still, here's the undeniable truth. Shedeur Sanders has already bent the league's attention toward him. Whether he succeeds or struggles, people are going to tune in. And in a sport where relevance is everything, that's already a win for Cleveland. For Shedeur, though, the bigger challenge lies ahead, because the NFL doesn't crown legends in August. It crowns them in January and February, under the brightest lights, when the stakes are highest. The hype, the controversy, the Gabriel drama, all of it is noise compared to what really matters. Can he win when it counts? That's the question everyone from fans to front offices is waiting to see answered. And that's why this isn't just Cleveland's story anymore. It's the NFL's.